Management Studies IGNOU presents an audiobook on the course MMPC-002 Human Resource Management for MBA program. Presenting Block 3 Performance and Compensation Management, Unit 8 Performance Appraisal Part 1. After completing this unit, you should be able to understand the concept of performance appraisal, explain the performance appraisal process, discuss the benefits of appraisal, describe various appraisal methods, and understand the problems in appraisal. Introduction. Performance appraisal helps organizations to determine how employees can help to achieve the goals of the organizations. It has two important activities included in it. First has to do with determining the performance and other with the process of evaluation. In this unit, concept of performance appraisal and the processes involved in it have been discussed. Concept of performance appraisal. What is performance? What does the term performance actually mean? Employees are performing well when they are productive. Productivity implies both concern for effectiveness and efficiency. Effectiveness refers to goal accomplishment. However, it does not speak of the cost incurred in reaching the goal. That is where efficiency comes in. Efficiency evaluates the ratio of inputs consumed to outputs achieved. The greater the output for a given input, the greater the efficiency. It is not desirable to have objective measures of productivity such as hard data on effectiveness, number of units produced, or percent of crimes solved, etc., and hard data on efficiency, that is average cost per unit or ratio of sales volume to number of calls made, etc. In addition to productivity as measured in terms of effectiveness and efficiency, performance also includes personnel data such as measures of accidents, turnover, absences, and tardiness. That is, a good employee is one who not only performs well in terms of productivity but also minimizes problems for the organization by being to work on time, by not missing days, and by minimizing the number of work-related accidents. What is appraisal? Appraisals are judgments of the characteristics, traits, and performance of others. On the basis of these judgments, we assess the worth or value of others and identify what is good or bad. In industry, performance appraisal is a systematic evaluation of employees by supervisors. Employees also wish to know their position in the organization. Appraisals are essential for making many administrative decisions like selection, training, promotion, transfer, wage and salary administration, etc. Besides, they aid in personnel research. Performance appraisal thus is a systematic and objective way of judging the relative worth of ability of an employee in performing his task. Performance appraisal helps to identify those who are performing their assigned task well and those who are not, and the reasons for such performance. Goals of performance appraisal. Conducting performance appraisals on employees' performance should be more than a simple checklist of do's and don'ts. Performance evaluation should serve as a vital component, one that is of interest to both the organization and the employee. From the organizational perspective, sound performance appraisals can ensure that correct work is being done, work that assists in meeting department goals, simply put. Each employee's work should support the activities needed to action his or her supervisor's performance objectives. This should ultimately continue up the hierarchy with all efforts supporting corporate strategic goals. From the employee perspective, properly operating performance appraisal systems provide a clear communication of work expectations. Knowing what is expected is a first step in helping one to cope better with the stress usually associated with the lack of clear direction. Secondly, properly designed performance appraisals should also serve as a means of assisting an employee's personal development. To make effective performance appraisals a reality, 4 criteria need to be present. These are: number 1, employees should be actively involved in the evaluation and development process. Number 2, supervisors need to enter performance appraisals with a constructive and helpful attitude. Number 3, realistic goals must be mutually set. And number 4, supervisors must be aware and have knowledge of the employee's job and performance. Objectives of performance appraisal. Performance appraisal has a number of specific objectives. These are: number 1, to review past performance. Number 2, to assess training needs. Number 3, to help develop individuals. Number 4, to audit the skills within an organization. Number 5, to set targets for future performance. And number 6, to identify potential for promotion. Some employees may believe that performance appraisal is simply used by the organization to apportion blame and to provide a basis for disciplinary action. They see it as a stick that management has introduced with which to beat people. Under such situations, a well-thought-out performance appraisal is doomed to failure. Even if the more positive objectives are built into the system, problems may still arise because they may not all be achievable and they may cause conflict. For example, an appraisee is less likely to be open about any shortcomings in past performance during a process that affects pay or promotion prospects, or which might be perceived as leading to disciplinary action. It is therefore important that performance appraisal should have specific objective. Not only should the objectives be clear, but also they should form part of the organization's whole strategy. Thus, incorporating objectives into the appraisal system may highlight areas for improvement, new directions, and opportunities. The performance appraisal process. The steps that are involved in appraisal process are: number 1, the appraisal process begins with the establishment of performance standards. These should have evolved out of job analysis and the job description. These performance standards should also be clear and objective enough to be understood and measured. Too often, these standards are articulated in some such phrases as a full day's work or a good job. Vague phrases tell us nothing. The expectations a manager has in terms of work performance by the subordinates must be clear enough in their minds so that the managers would be able to, at some later date, to communicate these expectations to their subordinates and appraise their performance against these previously established standards. Number 2. Once performance standards are established, it is necessary to communicate these expectations. It should not be part of the employee's job to guess what is expected of them. Unfortunately, too many jobs have vague performance standards. The problem is compounded when these standards are not communicated to the employees. It is important to note that communication is a two-way street. Mere transference of information from the manager to the subordinate regarding expectations is not communication. Communication only takes place when the transference of information has taken place and has been received and understood by the subordinate. Therefore, feedback is necessary. Hence, the information communicated by the manager has been received and understood in the way it was intended. Number 3. The third step in appraisal process is measurement of performance. To determine what actual performance is, it is necessary to acquire information about it. We should be concerned with how we measure and what we measure. 4 common sources of information are frequently used by managers to measure actual performance: personal observation, statistical reports, oral reports, and written reports. Each has its strengths and weaknesses. However, a combination of them increases both the number of input sources and the probability of receiving reliable information. What we measure is probably more critical to the evaluation process than how we measure. The selection of the wrong criteria can result in serious dysfunctional consequences. What we measure determines to a great extent what people in an organization will attempt to excel at. The criteria we choose to measure must represent performance as stated in the first 2 steps of the appraisal process. Number 4. The fourth step in the appraisal process is the comparison of actual performance with standards. The attempt in this step is to note deviations between standard performance and actual performance. One of the most challenging tasks facing managers is to present an accurate appraisal to the subordinate and then have the subordinate accept the appraisal in a constructive manner. The impression that subordinates receive about their assessment has a strong impact on their self-esteem and very important on their subsequent performance. Of course, conveying good news is considerably less difficult than conveying the bad news that performance has been below expectations. Thus, the discussion of the appraisal can have negative as well as positive motivational consequences. Number 5. The final step in the appraisal is the initiation of corrective action when necessary. Corrective action can be of two types. One is immediate and deals predominantly with symptoms. The other is basic and delves into causes. Immediate corrective action is often described as putting out fires, whereas basic corrective action gets to the source of deviation and seeks to adjust the differences permanently. Immediate action corrects something right now and get things back on track. Basic action asks how and why performance deviated. In some instances, managers may rationalize that they do not have the time to take basic corrective action and therefore must be content to perpetually put out fires. Benefits of performance appraisal. The benefits of an effective appraisal scheme can be summed up under three categories. These are for the organization, for the appraiser, and for the appraisee. For the organization, the benefits that would accrue to the organization are: Number 1. Improved performance throughout the organization due to more effective communication of the organization's objectives and values, increased sense of cohesiveness and loyalty, and improved relationships between managers and staff. Number 2. Improvement in the tasks performed by each member of the staff. Number 3. Identification of ideas for improvement. Number 4. Expectations and long-term plans can be developed. Number 5. Training and development needs can be identified more clearly. Number 6. A culture of continuous improvement and success can be created and maintained. Number 7. People with potential can be identified and career development plans can be formulated for future staff requirements. For the appraiser, the benefits that would accrue to the appraiser are: Number 1. The opportunity to develop an overview of individual jobs and departments. Number 2. Identification of ideas for improvements. Number 3. The opportunity to link team and individual objectives and targets with departmental and organizational objectives. Number 4. The opportunity to clarify expectations of the contribution the manager expects from teams and individuals. Number 5. The opportunity to reprioritize targets. And number 6. A means of forming a more productive relationship with staff based on mutual trust and understanding. For the appraisee, the benefits that would accrue are: Number 1. Increased motivation. Number 2. Increased job satisfaction. And number 3. Increased sense of personal value. Performance appraisal methods. This section looks at how management can actually establish performance standards and devise instruments that can be used to measure and appraise an employee's performance. A number of methods are now available to assess the performance of the employees. Number 1. Critical incident method. Critical incident appraisal focuses the rater's attention on those critical or key behaviors that make the difference between doing a job effectively and doing it ineffectively. What the appraiser does is write down little anecdotes that describe what the employee did that was especially effective or ineffective. In this approach to appraisal, specific behaviors are cited, not vaguely defined personality traits. A behaviorally based appraisal such as this should be more valid than trait-based appraisals because it is clearly more job-related. It is one thing to say that an employee is aggressive or imaginative or relaxed, but that does not tell anything about how well the job is being done. Critical incidents, with their focus on behaviors, judge performance rather than personalities. Additionally, a list of critical incidents on a given employee provide a rich set of examples from which the employee can be shown which of his or her behaviors are desirable and which ones call for improvement. This method suffers from two drawbacks. Number 1. Supervisors are reluctant to write these reports on a daily or even weekly basis for all of their subordinates, as it is time-consuming and burdensome for them. Number 2. Critical incidents do not lend themselves to quantification. Therefore, the comparison and ranking of subordinates is difficult. Checklist. In the checklist, the evaluator uses a bit of behavioral descriptions and checks of those behaviors that apply to the employee. The evaluator merely goes down the list and gives yes or no responses. Once the checklist is complete, it is usually evaluated by the staff of personnel department, not the rater himself. Therefore, the rater does not actually evaluate the employee's performance, he or she merely records it. An analyst in the personnel department then scores the checklist, often weighing the factors in relationship to their importance. The final evaluation can then be returned to the rating manager for discussion with the subordinate, or someone from the personnel department can provide the feedback to the subordinate. Graphic rating scale. One of the oldest and most popular methods of appraisal is the graphic rating scale. They are used to assess factors such as quantity and quality of work, job knowledge, cooperation, loyalty, dependability, attendance, honesty, integrity, attitudes, and initiative, etc. However, this method is most valid when abstract traits like loyalty or integrity are avoided unless they can be defined in more specific behavioral terms. The assessor goes down the list of factors and notes that point along the scale or continuum that list of factors and notes that point along the scale or continuum that best describe the employee. There are typically 5 to 10 points on the continuum. In the design of the graphic scale, the challenge is to ensure that both the factors evaluated and the scale pins are clearly understood and unambiguous to the rater. Should ambiguity occur, bias is introduced. Some of the advantages of this method are: Number 1. They are less time-consuming to develop and administer. Number 2. They permit quantitative analysis. And number 3. There is greater standardization of items, so comparability with other individuals in diverse job categories is possible. Forced choice method. The forced choice appraisal is a special type of checklist, but the rater has to choose between 2 or more statements, all of which may be favorable or unfavorable. The appraiser's job is to identify which statement is most, or in some cases, least descriptive of the individual being evaluated. To reduce bias, the right answers are not known to the rater. Someone in the personnel department scores the answers based on the key. This key should be validated, so management is in a position to say that individuals with higher scores are better performing employees. The major advantages of the forced choice method are: Number 1. Since the appraiser does not know the right answers, it reduces bias. Number 2. It looks at overall performance. Number 3. It is based on the behavior of the employees. Behaviorally anchored rating scales. These scales combine major elements from the critical incident and graphic rating scale approaches. The appraiser rates the employees based on items along continuum, but the points are example of actual behavior on the given job rather than general descriptions or traits. Behaviorally anchored rating scales specify definite, observable, and measurable job behavior. Examples of job-related behavior and performance dimensions are generated by asking participants to give specific illustrations on effective and ineffective behavior regarding each performance dimension. These behavioral examples are then retranslated into appropriate performance dimensions. Those that are sorted into the dimension for which they were generated are retained. The final group of behavior incidents are then numerically scaled to a level of performance that each is perceived to represent. The incidents that are retranslated and have high rater agreement on performance effectiveness are retained for use as anchors on the performance dimension. The result of the processes that we have discussed so far are behavioral descriptions such as anticipates, plans, executes, solves immediate problems, carries out orders, and handles emergency situations. This method has certain advantages which are: number 1, it does tend to reduce rating errors. Number 2, it assesses behavior over traits. Number 3, it clarifies to both the employee and rater which behaviors connote good performance and which connote bad. Group order ranking. The group order ranking requires the evaluator to place employees into a particular classifications such as top 1/5 or second 1/5. Evaluators are asked to rank the employees in the top 5%, the next 5%, the next 15%. So if a rater has 20 subordinates, only 4 can be in the top 5th, and of course 4 must also be relegated to the bottom 5th. The advantage of this method is that it prevents raters from inflating their evaluations so everyone looks good, or from homogenizing. The evaluations for everyone is rated near the average outcome that are usual with the graphic rating scale. It has certain disadvantages which are: number 1, it is not good if the number of employees being compared is small. At the extreme, if the evaluator is looking at only 4 employees, it is very possible that they may all be excellent, yet the evaluator may be forced to rank them into top quarter, second quarter, third quarter, and low quarter. Number 2, another disadvantage which plagues all relative measures is the zero-sum game consideration. This means any change must add up to 0. For example, if there are 12 employees in a department performing at different levels of effectiveness, by definition, 3 are in the top quarter, 3 in the second quarter, and so forth. The 6th best employee, for instance, would be in the second quartile. Ironically, if 2 of the workers in the 3rd or 4th quartiles leave the department and are not replaced, then our 6th best employee now fit into the 3rd quarter. Number 3, because comparisons are relative, an employee who is mediocre may score high only because he or she is the best of the worst. Similarly, an excellent performer who is matched against stiff competition may be evaluated poorly when in absolute terms his or her performance is outstanding. Individual ranking. The individual ranking method requires the evaluator merely to list all the employees in an order from highest to lowest. Only one can be the best. If the evaluator is required to appraise 30 individuals, ranking method carries the same pluses and minuses as group order ranking. Paired comparison. The paired comparison method is calculated by taking the total of n into n-1 divided by 2 comparisons. A score is obtained for each employee by simply counting the number of pairs in which the individual is the preferred member. It ranks each individual in relationship to all others on a one-on-one basis. If 10 people are being evaluated, the first person is compared with each of the other 9, and the number of items this person is preferred in any of the 9 pairs is tabulated. Each of the remaining 9 persons in turn is compared in the same way, and a ranking is evolved by the greatest number of preferred victories. This method ensures that each employee is compared against every other, but the method can become unwieldy when large number of employees are being compared. Management by objectives. Management by objectives, or MBO, is a process that converts organizational objectives into individual objectives. It can be thought of as consisting of 4 steps, that is, goal setting, action planning, self-control, and periodic reviews. In goal setting, the organization's overall objectives are used as guidelines from which departmental and individual objectives are set. At the individual level, the manager and subordinate jointly identify those goals that are critical for the subordinate to achieve in order to fulfill the requirements of the job as determined in job analysis. These goals are agreed upon and then become the standards by which the employee's result will be evaluated. In action planning, the means are determined for achieving the ends established in goal setting. that is, realistic plans are developed to attain the objectives. This step includes identifying the activities necessary to accomplish the objective, establishing the critical relationships between these activities, estimating the time requirement for each activity, and determining the resources required to complete each activity. Self-control refers to the systematic monitoring and measuring of performance, ideally by having the individual review his or her own performance. The MBA philosophy is built on the assumptions that individuals can be responsible, can exercise self-direction, and do not require external controls and threats of punishment. Finally, with periodic progress reviews, corrective action is initiated when behavior deviates from the standards established in the goal-setting phase. Again, consistent with MBA philosophy, these manager-subordinate reviews are conducted in a constructive rather than punitive manner. Reviews are not meant to degrade the individual but to aid in future performance. These reviews should take place at least 2 or 3 times in a year. The advantages of MBO are: number 1, it is result-oriented. It assists the planning and control functions and provides motivation. Number 2, employees know exactly what is expected of them and how they will be evaluated. And number 3, employees have a greater commitment to objectives that they have participated in developing than to those unilaterally set by their bosses. 360-degree appraisal. The 360-degree feedback process involves collecting perceptions about a person's behavior and the impact of that behavior from the person's boss or bosses, direct reports, colleagues, fellow members of project teams, internal and external customers, and suppliers. Other names for 360-degree feedback are multi-rater feedback, multi-source feedback, full circle appraisal, and group performance review. 360-degree feedback is a method and a tool that provides each employee the opportunity to receive performance feedback from his or her supervisor and 4 to 8 peers, subordinates, and customers. 360-degree feedback allows each individual to understand how his effectiveness as an employee, co-worker, or staff member is viewed by others. The most effective processes provide feedback that is based on behaviors that other employees can see. The feedback provides insight about the skills and behaviors desired in the organization to accomplish the mission, vision, goals, and values. The feedback is firmly planted in behaviors needed to exceed customer expectations. People who are chosen as raters are usually those that interact routinely with the person receiving feedback. The purpose of the feedback is: number 1, to assist each individual to understand his or her strengths and weaknesses. Number 2, to contribute insights into aspects of his or her work needing professional development. Now let's talk about some of the major considerations in using 360-degree feedback. These are basically concerned with how to select the feedback tools and process, how to select the raters, how to use the feedback, how to review the feedback, and how to manage and integrate the process into a larger performance management system. You were listening to the audiobook by the School of Management Studies IGNOU for MBA program. Course code MMPC-002 Human Resource Management. Course Coordinator Professor Nayantara Padhi from School of Management Studies IGNOU. Voiceover by Harpreet Kaur. Edited by Tarannum Jahan. Program assisted by Jagbandhu Jana. Program produced by Dr. Manoj Kumar Singh. This program was brought to you by Electronic Media Production Center of Indira Gandhi National Open University.